Welcome, seekers of lore, to another journey through the shadowed annals of the First Age. Tonight, we return to the doom-laden tale of Túrin Turambar and the fall of Nargothrond, a saga woven with pride, betrayal, and the fire of the great dragon Glaurung. Few events in Middle-earth's history are as tragic, as fateful, and as devastating as the sack of the hidden city, where a kingdom was brought low by the folly of its greatest champion. As we unravel this harrowing chapter, we shall explore the pride of Túrin, the cunning malice of Morgoth's beast, and the grim legacy left in the dragon's wake. Prepare yourselves, for this is a tale of heroism tainted by doom, where fate itself seemed to conspire against the son of Húrin. In the year 495 of the First Age, Nargothrond stood as a bastion of strength in Beleriand. Its halls delved deep beneath the high Faroth, hidden from the eyes of the enemy. Finrod Felagund, its founder, had long since perished in his noble sacrifice for Beren, and rule had passed to Orodreth, his lesser in wisdom and strength. Yet fate had woven a darker thread into the tapestry of this realm, for into its courts had come Túrin, son of Húrin, a man of great prowess, but of a heart troubled by shadows. He had taken up the black sword Gurthang and had become a warlord of the elves. Yet his counsel was proud and reckless, scorning the secrecy that had long been Nargothrond's shield. He bid them forsake their hidden ways and take the fight to Morgoth in open war, and so the bridge of Nargothrond was built, spanning the Narog, a symbol of Túrin's defiance, but also the harbinger of its doom. Far in the north, Morgoth, the great enemy, watched and smiled. He needed no spies to tell him of this folly, for the cries of war echoed across the land, and the once secret stronghold now stood revealed. In his iron halls of Angband, he roused Glaurung, father of dragons, a creature of vast malice and cunning, whose fire had burned the fields of Ardgilen long before. With a host of orcs and wolves, Glaurung was loosed upon Beleriand, and ruin rode in his wake. The hosts of Nargothrond, emboldened by Túrin's might, rode forth in battle, and there, upon the field of Tumhalad, they met their doom. For none could stand against the dragon's gaze, and the withering fire that he poured forth. The elves fell in heaps, their banners trampled into the earth. Orodreth, last of Finrod's line, was slain, and Túrin, though mighty in arms, was cast down and dazed by Glaurung's sorcery. When the warriors of Nargothrond were broken, the city lay open and defenseless. The orcs swarmed over its bridge, pouring into the halls like a black tide, slaying and taking captives. And at last, Glaurung, great and terrible, entered the city. No wall could halt him, no sword could pierce his hide, and in his cruelty he did not merely raze Nargothrond to the ground. He defiled it. He gorged himself upon its treasures, coiling in the halls of Finrod like a great worm of night. The captives, among them elf maidens of great beauty, were driven forth in chains, their fate left to the torments of the north. But one prisoner remained, who would bear the full weight of this ruin. Fine Dwylus, daughter of Orodreth, beloved of the fallen. And here we must pause, for the darkest moments are yet to come. We shall continue our tale in the next part, where Glaurung's words become more terrible than his fire, and Túrin's fate is sealed by the cunning of the dragon's gaze. As the fires of Nargothrond smoldered and its people were dragged into darkness, Túrin awoke from his battle stupor, his mind still clouded by the weight of sorcery. The son of Húrin, who had stood defiant against Morgoth's hosts, now found himself alone among the ruin he had unwittingly wrought. Yet he was not alone for long. Slithering forth from the shattered gates, Glaurung found him, the dragon's vast golden eyes deep as abyssal pits locked upon Túrin, and he who had bested many foes in combat found himself helpless, caught in the net of the beast's will. "Hail, son of Húrin," spoke Glaurung, his voice thick with venomous mockery. "Thou hast labored well, and much joy did thy pride bring to Morgoth. Behold the fruits of thy wisdom. Behold the bridge, O master of war. Nargothrond lies open, and its people scream beneath the lash, and lo, The daughter of Orodreth, whom they called the Fair, is borne away. Haste, O valiant one, save her if thou canst." Túrin wavered, his heart torn asunder. The words of the dragon were lies, yet truth was mingled within them like poison stirred into a cup of sweet wine. He clenched the hilt of Gurthang, but his hand shook, for the power that bound him was not of sinew nor steel, but of will. Glaurung smiled, seeing the torment writ upon his prey's face, and then the final blow was struck. "Go now to thy mother, son of Húrin. Haste to Dorlomin, for there sits Morwen waiting, and thy sister weeps in thy absence. While thou didst play at war, didst thou forget them? Or didst thou think them safe, while all lands burn under the shadow of my master?" The doom of Túrin was sealed. In that moment, all else was cast aside. Finduilas, the fallen city, the cries of the captives. His thoughts turned only to Dorlomin, to his mother and sister, whom he had abandoned in their wretched exile. The spell of the dragon lifted, but its venom lingered. With a cry of anguish, Túrin fled, spurred by falsehoods wrapped in the guise of love. Behind him, Glaurung laughed, for he knew well the ruin he had wrought. As Túrin vanished into the wilderness, the last hope of Nargothrond perished. Finduilas, bound and weeping, was taken northward, past the woods of Brethil, where she called for her would-be savior. Yet no answer came. The folk of Brethil found her too late, slain by the cruel hands of orcs, her body cast upon a mound of spears. "Tell the Mormegil that Finduilas is here," she whispered with her dying breath, but her words were carried only by the wind. And so it was that Túrin, blinded by grief and deception, turned his feet toward Dorlomin, while behind him the ashes of Nargothrond were left to smolder beneath the wings of the dragon. Glaurung coiled in the halls of Finrod, the first of the great strongholds of the Eldar to fall to Morgoth's will, but not the last. The war was shifting, and doom crept ever closer. But what awaited Túrin in Dorlomin? What lay ahead for the dragon that now lay upon the treasure hoard of the fallen? We shall see in the next part, where the shadow lengthens and the tale of Túrin Túrambar grows ever darker. The wind howled over the desolation of Nargothrond, carrying with it the scent of death and ruin. Glaurung, the father of dragons, lay upon the treasures of Finrod Felagund, his vast form coiled amid the gold and jewels, his iron belly pressing down upon the wealth of the fallen kingdom. Yet for all his might, it was not wealth that pleased him most, nor the simple pleasure of destruction. It was the taste of sorrow, the breaking of spirits, the slow and relentless unraveling of hope. And none had he wounded so deeply as Túrin, the black blade of Nargothrond, who even now rode northward, blind to the truth, snared by the cunning of the dragon's words. Túrin came to Dorlomin with haste, his heart burning with the need to find his kin. But Dorlomin was not as he had left it. The proud house of Húrin had long been broken under the yoke of Easterling lords, and Morwen, his mother, was gone. None knew whither she had fled, only that she had vanished into the wildlands beyond the mountains, her fate unknown. The house of his fathers stood empty, a hollow place filled with ghosts and silence. Grief took hold of him, but in grief there was also wrath. He turned upon the Easterlings, driving them from his father's lands, his fury alone enough to put fear into their hearts. Yet it was a hollow victory, for what land remained to claim when all those he loved had gone? When at last he learned that Morwen had gone to Doriath, and that Finduilas had been taken eastward, his choice was set before him: to seek his mother, or to save the maiden who had called to him. The paths of his fate stood open, and for the last time, he might have turned aside from doom. But Glaurung's lies ran deep. Finduilas had cried for him, but he had not been there to answer. And when at last he rode to Brethil, to the place where she had been taken, he found not a captive, but a tomb. The men of Brethil had laid her body in a barrow by the Teglin, naming it Howden Eleth, the mound of the elf maiden. There Túrin stood as stone, staring upon the place where she lay, and his voice rose in bitter lament. "Too late have I come. This is a tomb, and I am shut out from it." The shadow of his doom darkened, and in his heart he cursed himself. He had forsaken her, though he had sworn to protect her. He had believed the words of a dragon and left her to die. And though he knew now the truth, though the weight of his error bore down upon him, it was too late to turn back. Túrin remained in Brethil, taking up arms against the roaming bands of Morgoth's servants, seeking battle as though war could drive away the voices that haunted his sleep. Yet Glaurung had not forgotten him. The dragon had seen the seeds of ruin sown, and he had not yet finished his work. As the days darkened, the shadow of Glaurung's will stretched toward Brethil, and doom drew ever nearer. What horrors did the dragon yet have in store? What fate awaited the fallen hero who wandered beneath the black wings of despair? We shall see in the next part, where Glaurung strikes the cruelest blow of all, and the tale of Túrin nears its bitter end. The days of Túrin Túrambar in Brethil were spent in restless war, for the woods were no longer safe. The servants of Morgoth crept ever closer, orcs prowling the edges of the land, as if drawn by some unseen will. Yet none dared cross the Teiglin while the Black Sword dwelt among the Haladin. Túrin, now known as Túrambar, the Master of Doom, had found a place among them, though his heart was scarred by grief. The name of Finduales was ever upon the wind, a ghostly whisper among the leaves. But for a time, he turned from sorrow, seeking solace in a newfound joy. Niniel, the pale maiden who had come among the Haladin as one lost in shadow. She was found wandering in the wilds, her mind clouded as if veiled by mist, remembering nothing of her past. Kindness was shown to her, and she was given the name Niniel, meaning Tear Maiden. From the first, Túrin was drawn to her, though he knew not why, and in time love grew between them. He took her as his wife, and for a brief moment there was peace. The shadow that had long clung to him seemed to wane, and laughter was heard again in the land of Brethil. But such joys are fleeting in tales woven by doom, and Glaurung had not yet struck his final blow. The great dragon stirred from his hoard in Nargothrond, for he had watched from afar and seen that his work was not yet complete. With slow and terrible purpose he left his golden bed and crawled forth, his vast form crushing the ruins of Nargothrond beneath him. His eyes turned eastward, and his malice reached forth like a long shadow over the woods of Brethil. He came not with armies nor fire, but alone, and yet no fewer trembled at his coming. It was Dorlas, a warrior of Brethil, who first beheld the great worm slithering toward the river. He fled in haste to Túrin, bearing grim tidings. A dragon comes, Glaurung himself, crawling forth from Nargothrond, seeking ruin once more. The hearts of the Haladin quailed, for they knew well the tales of his destruction. Yet Túrin, unshaken, took up Gurthang, his black blade, and made ready for battle. "Here at last is a foe worthy of me," he said, and with a band of warriors he set out toward the crossing of Cabad and Aros, where the Teiglin ran swift and deep. But as Túrin prepared for battle, fear gripped Niniel, and she fled into the woods, drawn by some nameless dread she could not understand. A foreboding filled her heart, and though she knew not why, she followed after her husband, drawn toward the place where doom would be fulfilled. Túrin and his men lay in wait, watching as the dragon drew near. With careful cunning he planned his strike, waiting for the moment when Glaurung would stretch forth his vast bulk across the ravine. Then, with all the strength of his will, he sprang forth and drove Gurthang deep into the belly of the beast. A great cry shook the land, and black blood poured forth like a river of fire. The dragon thrashed in agony, the ground trembling beneath his wrath, but though his body was broken, his malice was not yet spent. With the last of his strength, Glaurung raised his head and fixed his gaze upon Túrin. "Hail, son of Húrin," he hissed. "Well have I paid thee for thy stroke, and thou shalt know my final gift." Then his eyes darkened, and the great dragon lay still. Túrin, overcome by the venomous fumes, fell senseless beside his foe. And then came Niniel, stumbling through the trees, her heart racing. She saw the form of the dragon, saw the black blade buried in its belly, and saw Túrin lying motionless beside it. With a cry, she rushed to his side, trembling as she touched his face. Then, as if the shadow upon her mind had been torn away, memory flooded back, and the cruelest of truths was revealed. "I am Ninor," she whispered, "daughter of Húrin, sister of Túrin." She reeled, her breath catching in her throat, for the truth was too great to bear. The love she had shared, the joy she had known, it was built upon a terrible lie. And in that moment, all hope fled from her. She turned away, blinded by grief, and fled to the edge of the ravine. With one last, broken cry, she cast herself into the rushing waters below. Thus was the doom of the children of Húrin fulfilled, and thus did Glaurung, though slain, deal his final wound. Yet Túrin still lay senseless, knowing nothing of what had passed. What fate awaited him when at last he awoke? We shall see in the final part of our tale, where the shadow reaches its end and the black sword meets his fate.